Good morning and welcome to Coffee and Conversation with Dr. Timothy Wood, Deputy Officer Chief, Mars, DIA. Before the program begins, first a message from our sponsor, Jane's. Now, please welcome INSA Vice President of Policy, Bishop Garrison.
Good morning and Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're excited to welcome yet another one of our community's top leaders for this very, very important discussion. Just a few housekeeping notes to begin with. If you have questions, and as always, we hope you do, please submit them in the questions box to the right, and I'll do my best to get to as many of your questions in the time that we have allotted. We'd also like to welcome members of the press. This is a reminder to everyone that this program is on the record and is being recorded. And finally, a big thank you to our sponsor, Jane's, for their support of this series. We could not bring top-level thought leadership like this to you without them and companies like them. And now I am pleased to welcome Ben Conklin, Head of Innovation and New Products at Jane's, to introduce our speaker. Ben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bishop. Yeah, as you mentioned, we're really excited to sponsor this series. As a matter of fact, we did an entire year of this topic last year and we couldn't get enough, so we had to roll it into this year. Obviously, this is a hot topic for all of us, and of course, very important to Jane's. As we think about the future of open source intelligence and commercially available information, we can reflect on our 125-year history. Really starting out as a publisher, many people started their career with, of course, the Jane's books sitting on their desks. And we've gone through this sort of same transformation that at a smaller scale that you're going to hear about from Dr. Wood today. Jane's has been through some of those that same journey of changing our methodology and our structure to take advantage of the increasingly available amount of information, being able to support the rigorous requirements of tradecraft, and being able to produce information, especially foundational intelligence, in our case for Jane's customers, and of course in the case you're going to hear from Dr. Wood for supporting the whole national security mission. And we've done that by building out our database of military equipment, foundational military intelligence, over 150 million connections across that, and that's been a really exciting journey for us. I know, in fact, when I started at Jane's I came into Jane's to help drive some of that innovation and drive some of those new products. We are often inspired by the journey that Dr. Wood is going to talk about today, which is the journey of the Mars program. So I'm really excited to introduce him as our speaker today. Dr. Wood is the Deputy Office Chief and Program Manager for the Machine Assisted Analytic Rapid Repository System, known as Mars. I think sometimes people come up with the acronym first and the words later because there's a lot packed in there. But that's really impressive. But yeah, it's really exciting at DIA. In this role, he's really focused on leading the modernization of this analytic platform, which is designed for the big data demands of the future. Obviously, that we all see it happening every day, right? The volume of information and the complexity growing, and the complexity of the mission. So this is a tall order for him. He guides the transformation of the analytic workflows and methodologies to take advantage of data science and advanced tools as we transition from the old and beloved MIDB, or modernized integrated database. He brings decades of experience in defense intelligence and analytic modernization to this work. Prior to his current role, and as I got to learn from him earlier in this call, he actually was the Deputy Director of DIA's National Center for Medical Intelligence, as he reminded me that DIA covers everything to do with security, and that's including medical, any kind of foundational intelligence required. And of course, he led that mission there, which, as you can imagine, took on real importance in the last decade, and was really critical that DIA had that practice there. So really exciting foundation to come from, that Dr. Wood comes from, and really exciting to see him advancing the analytic capabilities beyond that and helping improve the decision-making tools across the community. So with that, please join me in a virtual round of applause for Dr. Wood. Over to you, Dr. Wood.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the invitation and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Mars as a program. It's been one of those things that, you know, we talk about transformation. James, 125 years. DIA, not quite as long. However, the capabilities and the requirement for medical and military intelligence in general, foundational military intelligence in particular, has been around since the beginning of our country. And it's something that, you know, as we move into a digitized world, just is going to be amplified as the level and quantity of data presented needs to be absorbed and assessed as rapidly as possible.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dr. Wood, if I could call you Tim. Thank you for being here. We know how busy you are. We're going to try to pack a lot into a little bit of time, and just given the breadth and depth of your career and your experience, this is going to be really great for our viewers here and for us, for me as an individual just listening to hearing from you. So, as the deputy director, or deputy office chief, excuse me, and manager for the Mars program, can you just tell us briefly some details about what Mars is, the significant milestones, and just your current overall strategic priorities?
So what Mars is, I'll start with that. Ben pointed out the modernized integrated database. That's the MIDB foundational military intelligence authoritative repository. That was built in the 1990s and has been evolving ever since. So if you can imagine the evolution of the internet, you are looking at MIDB as something that has evolved with that, and with the same constraints and challenges when you talk about technology. Mars is that replacement. Again, the acronym was a challenge, obviously, but really this is about getting things faster in an accelerated, automated, and augmenting the human in the loop for foundational military intelligence, providing that authoritative repository for all military, joint military intelligence functions. The piece that matters here is really that digitization of the information, the display, the capability of being able to share it, and making sure that it is not just human understandable, but machine understandable, so that we can keep pace with the world that we live in today.
So it is in a part about human machine teaming and making these tools that the human analysts, will be able to utilize to help improve their overall capabilities as well then. So how does Mars align with the broader overall mission of DIA, given a little bit of what you've said there?
So when speaking to, I'll go back to the milestones and then the strategic aspect of how we're aligned. For the milestones, we've already had our IOC, or our initial operating capacity, and that has been a way that we've delivered to the warfighter and to all of our analysts a way of actually using a more visual-oriented tool to produce information for foundational military intelligence. That allows us to triage data faster, because everybody knows, most people, including my age, grew up with the internet. They grew up with all the tools, and they grew up with Google, they grew up with maps, they grew up with understanding how to use things in a visual way and interpreting data more rapidly versus spreadsheets, which can create the blur that you would have as you're driving down the road. And the way to change business and the way to change the workflow is really about getting things to be natural, intuitive, and allowing that to be an accelerated capability of data delivery to the analyst for assessment, and to the warfighter for their needs and planning and for operations. For the priorities that we're focused on, this really is about prioritizing how do we get data at scale and speed to the warfighter. If we want to have a decision advantage, and that is one of DIA's key elements, the decision advantage, making sure that we can decisively prevent and, if necessary, win wars, that key is getting data to the right people, the right time, in the right manner. And that is all requiring changes to the technology, the digitization of information, and doing assessments in a more rapid fashion, where I use the systems, the machines, to do the work that can be automated, and then allow humans to use the more complex thinking that is required for tradecraft and implementation for better understanding of decisions, opportunities, courses of actions, most likely, most dangerous, for example, when we talk about that at the commands.
So if I can follow up on one thing, you just really hit on a great topic, talking about the warfighter and the benefits provided by the Mars program to analysts, to warfighters downrange. How does it enhance the intelligence picture for the decision makers in supporting the warfighter?
So one of the great things is actually taking data that is the assessment, but not just the assessment, but additional information, making that available in the same context so you can actually make determinations. Do I need to change my assessment? Do I need to reconsider how this looks from a strategic, operational, or tactical perspective? Having data in context matters. So at the commands, many people will be familiar with target system analysis and the joint intelligence preparation of the operating environment. That's bringing data together to actually have a holistic picture of the theater, what's happening, what's going on, and what does it mean. We're doing that with our system so that we can enable those things to be faster, more accurate, and adapt to change, and actually help with the indicators of warning and change detection that's critical for warfighters as we go through future activities.
Yeah, and I love the way you kind of encapsulate the idea of the integrated picture that is supported by more of this this data for intelligence gathering. How is the Mars program? How are you integrating something that's really near and dear, I think, to everyone's heart that may be watching this right now, the OSINT piece, the open source intelligence, with classified intelligence sources to provide a part of that more holistic, comprehensive picture that you just talked about?
So one of the key pieces there is how the data is actually displayed and delivered. From the OSINTs, in the world of OSIRs or OSINT intelligence reports, for example, we can bring those into the system, compare them to the other assessments that are out there if it's been assessed, but also publicly available, commercially available data. How can I deliver that to correlate that when I show you in a visual skill quite rapidly using military symbology? How do I do business? Connecting the dots of what I have that has been tagged, and this is where data tagging and data labeling matters, so that I can have that context rapidly understandable and make those correlations faster. From the DIA side, we also have the center called OSIC, which is the Open Source Intelligence Center, which is in our ST directorate. They are working on a program called Postman, which is really in its initial operations, really supporting not just the delivery of information, but also maintaining those requirements, managing those requirements, making sure that we're fulfilling those requirements. We can ingest the data as they bring it in and take full advantage of having that displayed based on what you need to know, what area of the world are you working in, what is your mission. And having those kind of things as part of the tags that are built into the system allow us to engage with displaying as much information as possible that's relevant to you. But if you don't need to know everything about the world, you just need to know everything about a certain area of the world, let's focus on that so we don't overwhelm you. Because one of the critical pieces of data volume and data at speed is not overwhelming people.
Yeah.
When there's so much information that you just can't, where do I start? And focusing on this is the things that are relevant to your topic area, your analytic space, or your operational environment. That's key to making sure that all this happens. And that's really about the automation and the digitization of data that we can provide and make available using the new technologies that have come about since the 1990s.
Yeah, because what you're really just describing, I think that's an amazing point, is that data noise that's in the background that can really throw the picture out of whack, so to speak, because you have so much information coming in that you really need to figure out how to streamline. So that kind of brings on a great question. Like, when we have so many of these emerging technology tools that we can get to the hands of the warfighter or the analyst, can you just share some insights into how the program is looking at these types of emerging tools to streamline this data from the analysis to action pipeline, so to speak?
So I will start with a couple things. That really gets into how we do tradecraft. And from a streamlining, as new tools come online with algorithms involved, understanding those algorithms, how data is managed, manipulated, or otherwise is critical for our confidence in the sourcing and provenance of that data to make sure that all source analysis can be achieved, understanding and not overcounting data. Meaning if something is duplicative, I need to recognize it's duplicative, it's not corroborating. That's a key piece of the workflow and the business process and tradecraft that is applied. So anytime that we have a tool that has algorithmic manipulation of data or incorporation or correlations, understanding that, what is it doing exactly, matters to us, so that we don't actually do the double, triple counts, which are highly likely if we aren't managing the fence and making sure that we are playing the traffic cop on knowing where the data comes from, how it's been manipulated, interrogated, or correlated, and then how it's delivered to us. That's critical for making sure that we can maintain unbiased approach to the data that is being assessed.
Yeah, and that's another excellent point. Not that I'm surprised, I'm not sure the expert, but you mentioned concerns about making sure things aren't, the systems aren't duplicative, that you're not bringing in duplicative data, that you're looking at ways, again, to create more efficiencies in the systems. And you kind of mentioned early on about the modernizing of DIA's systems. How is Mars leveraging these types of advancements in OSINT collection and analysis tools to improve the overall efficiency and effectiveness and adaptability of these tools in the overall system?
So the first thing is really about focus on standards for the data labeling, data tagging, and then the processes, the appliance program interface, application program interface, APIs, making sure that we're meeting industry standards, DoD standards, and IC standards, so that all the things are interoperable, which I appreciate James mentioned that in their video there. That interoperability is key for how do we share information, how do we pass information, because data flows matter, and modernizing all of our systems so that we have that interoperability is one of the aspects that we're working on to make sure that we can actually move data at scale, at speed, to the right place at the right time. That is the first step. And then making sure that we can do this in a wartime environment, not just in a peacetime environment. That's another step. But with that, that's where, again, we have to follow IC and DoD standards because we work in both communities, and we need to make sure that what we are doing follows all those policies and their consistency, so that when we contextualize information, those data tags, we understand. I always use the example, I know what a tank is. Yeah. What type of tank is it? That's another level of detail. But a tank is not a truck. I need to have clear language when I'm talking about my tags that is consistently applied across all of my data. Yes. Those kinds of pieces that we're working on to make sure that interoperable data allows me to correlate things together and actually facilitates a better understanding with the highest level of resolution possible, given the data that's available. We recognize not all data will meet our needs, and not all data is even available to fill some of those gaps. We recognize that, but we'll take any and all, and we like to take advantage of the fact that if we have this under the same language, I joke about our partners with the 5i, we're all English, but we all have a different way of speaking.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm sorry, yeah, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, language matters, and being consistent with what we understand, even in our own communities, analysis means different things to different people. And it's critical that we have the same definitions and the same understanding. And it starts with how I tag data and how I deliver that data with standards.
Yeah, and that's why groups like our sponsor James is really important for the type of systems that they create that allow individuals that have that database that can have that same foundational understanding of what type of information is out there and how you're labeling some of these things. But you spoke on interoperability particularly, and I want us to kind of dive into that a little bit more, because we do have these tools now for automation that can help do exactly to some extent what you're talking about and cleaning up the data and making sure it's properly labeled and tagged. So how are you looking at the Mars program balancing that automation piece with the human oversight, like utilizing it, as we kind of mentioned before, the human machine teaming aspect, especially when it comes to something like critical intelligence assessments?
And so one of the pieces there really gets to how that workflow is displayed as to how is the data delivered in a way that analysts and overseers can understand and follow the trail. It's about, when I talk about source and provenance for ICDs, the intelligence community directives that we have to follow for tradecraft 203, 205, 206 in particular, all of those really highlight knowing what you're talking about based on the data that you are using, and then making sure that we're conforming to that. We're making sure that those things are built into our system so that we are kind of doing rules enforcement to enable this to be a repeatable process, because that's critical as people move jobs, people move theaters, people move commands. They need to do the same process for a different reason. We need to make sure that the process is consistent and it is auditable in the sense of understanding what happened if, the back history of understanding in an event that an assessment was right or wrong, and there wants to be a look for oversight. How did I get to that assessment? What data did I use? What processes did I use? What was the reasons, the calculations, all the pieces the ICDs require for us for analytic framework, making sure that can be applicable. And part of that is really the knowledge engine behind Mars, making sure that we're enforcing the rules, that that data is available so that we can actually defend ICD 203 expectations with the data that's in the system.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we continue on this, I just want to remind folks, we want to hear from you. Please send us your questions here with Dr. Tim Wood this morning. Really robust conversation about the Mars program, about open source intelligence and variety of emerging technology tools here. So before we move on to kind of our next topic on collaboration, I just want to kind of close this section out with just one more question. We talk about we're in an era more so of exponential growth in data, and the way that, and our ability to engage the data more strategically, more smartly through data analytics, through different types of tools. How does Mars, excuse me, I want to say the Mars program, how does Mars enable analysts to filter through the data and extract what is most important? So it kind of goes back to one of our initial pieces about the data noise and about so much information coming in through these new data pipelines. Well, how are you looking at filtering in the overall extraction process?
Well, first part of that really gets into what data is brought into the system and made available for most users. And that really is kind of getting to, analysts know what data they need to answer their questions. And they have confidence in certain data sources and streams based on what they've done from a proven history of using that information for assessments. First thing is prioritizing those data feeds and data sets into the system to make sure that they are available. Secondly, as we look at new data sources and data streams, evaluating it. We have another department in the agency, the Analytic Innovation Office, that works on quality assurance framework. That's really focused on not only does the data fit the need, but any algorithms, do they actually help to support the workflow, and are they traceable in a sense of understanding the logic behind them? Because if you remember, 5 to 8 years ago, they talked about explainable AI. And as we move into a world where things will become more AI enabled and AI oriented, we need to make sure that we can explain what the machines are doing to the data to help support the analyst, and to have that as something that is not a surprise or misleading or unintentionally biased because of how it was generated. Those are all the pieces that we care about. From a data, what data do we bring in? Analysts put in requirements for data to meet their needs. OSIC is the DIA's principal way of going about that, but the commands also will pull in data. We have national and defense organizations, the DOS, the Defense Open Source Committee, and the National Open Source Committee, to actually focus on those priorities, what data is needed and what data is relevant to the question, because relevance, timeliness, all matters. And then obviously availability. How much access do we have to it? How can we share it? And that's one of the things that open source information provides, is the shareability. with our partners, not just within the community and collaborating among ourselves, but with our foreign partners as well. And that's a critical piece of why we care about bringing in more OSINT and taking advantage of the opportunity and the value it provides.
Yeah, and funny you should mention partners. It's a great segue. It's a, a fantastic point for us to move on to the collaboration piece. So how does Mars work with industry partners? I know we have a lot of interested parties here on the line that have questions on this. Are there opportunities for increased collaboration between DIA and the private sector?
There's always opportunity, and what we do is we use the DIA's Needopedia page, which has outlined some of our challenges. And when you go and get into the DIA website, you can actually go to the Needopedia page and look at what are we looking for, and then provide white papers that we can assess and evaluate. Does this meet our needs, and help us pull in those capabilities? That's just one way of going about it. Other ways of going about this really come down to when analysts see things, they will often, oh, look, this is wonderful. We have to dig into it. We can't just assume that it meets one analyst's need, because I have to make sure I meet global capability and be able to sustain it. That is another piece of this, of why the Needopedia is so important, because do I add value to the entire enterprise or just to a portion of it, and then prioritize that based on resources and reality. Does it work? How long will it take? And again, back to all the standards. Can I explain it? Can it match? Can it work? Can it integrate? And integration is that interoperability piece that matters to us, that we need things that have industry standards for technology so that they'll meet the DoD and the IC standards as well. Because we do care about the security pieces, and we're moving into zero trust aspects. That's a whole nother level of expectation that we need to have fine-grained capability of managing data from the start. So that's another piece of how industry partners bringing things in, tagging it the right way, making sure that that is very clear so that the zero trust principles can be applied is critical, because the department is moving that way, and we are required to do that as well.
So to kind of pull on that zero trust thread a bit, so another question to this is Mars interoperable with other systems across the IC? And does that mean that you, as a part of your role within the office, are you facilitating collaboration between intelligence agencies, so in the interagency intelligence framework?
So I'll speak to that on 2 points. There's hundreds of systems that MIDB interoperates with today, and MIDB has to be all functionalities replaced by Mars. So we are doing testing for interoperability with hundreds of systems to make that happen. From a collaboration standpoint, from an individual analyst side, really it's about what we're doing in the system to allow attribution of activities so that you can find out who are your colleagues, who are your partners in crime, for communities of interest to go and talk to each other. In the past, you didn't see that. And that was a challenge, because who made this change? Well, you only saw the last change. Now you can see more, and you can actually have a community built around a topic or a space, and that's it with intention, so that we can actually make that available. And also for seamless transition, as again, workforces move, workforces change, even on shifts. They need to be able to make that transition over time for time sensitive events. So we're trying to make sure that we have that information there, so that as you look for change detection, you know who made the change, based on what, and you can actually go and engage with them, especially if you have alternatives, which is critical for the alternative analysis aspect of ICD 203.
Well, and I'll ask this before we're going to jump into our audience Q&A here in a second, but kind of a last question on this. So as you talk about the interagency piece and how you're looking for opportunities for collaboration here, what cultural and structural barriers, as we know, they often exist to hinder this type of integration that we're talking about? So in what ways can Mars use OSINT, or your overall use of OSINT, contribute to fostering that exact type of trust we're talking about, to build more collaborative relationships between analysts and operators and across DoD and the broader IC?
So I'll give a great example of things I've done in the past and how this is applicable to Mars. When you talk about sourcing and when people want to have confidence in what you have done as an assessment, alternative sourcing is available and not always provided according to the ICD requirements. You can have them, you don't have to share all of them. Open source gives me that opportunity to share more, provide more of a confidence for assessments that someone might question in a way that I can build a larger base of information to support, which gives them greater fidelity and greater confidence of what you're saying, why you're saying it. And that is a piece that it really goes after. We are an all source agency. Our assessments are all source. So we have our classified, yes, but open source, if it meets the need of the mission, we want to provide it. We want to make it available and give it according to the need to know. When we talk about our partners, informing the collection of information with our other IC partners is critical, and it might be based on open source that we say, hey, we want you to look at this because, and we tie it to our mission. Sometimes that's the case of a trigger so that I can justify or show how I'm getting that collection need and that requirement met. It's a piece of the entire IC cycle, making sure that an assessment can be done from beginning to end. What is my collection requirement? It starts with what is my intelligence need, and working my way all the way around. And as I do that, it involves the entire community, making sure that I'm sharing information, making sure that what do you know, what do I know, what does this mean when I put it all together? There are things that are going to be in highly classified compartments. Understood. Can I get the gist of it? Can I compare it? Can I release the part that's going to matter to a partner using open source, which I can support with higher level information in a way that allows me to get the mission requirement met? That's a key piece. So a lot of times we will find information that's open source available, readily available. It's a little frightening sometimes if you're analyst looking at open source, like, wow, there's a lot out there that probably shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be open source, yeah.
But it's all about how we use that information and how we can leverage it, which is wonderful. We take full advantage of it. But that builds confidence even within our own community of to what we can and can't say, and then what we can share, which is a critical piece for any warfighter efforts, because that's where we have to make sure that it's not we just give you the information and say don't tell anybody. They have to execute against that mission and against that information. So they need to be able to share it. They need to be able to work with their partners, and some of those partners, obviously, we have different levels of partnerships and trust. And really, when it comes to information, it is about trust. Do you trust the information you've been given? On what basis? The more I can give you on that, the more I can share, the more readily valuable that information becomes for an actual decision.
Fantastic, fantastic. And that is another good, great pivot for us to start diving into a few of these audience questions. So first one up is from Clay Hicks from Signal Labs. And Clay asks, within the realm of OSINT and publicly available information, what capability is currently unavailable, don't have, to DIA that you see as being critical either now or in the near future?
That's a tough question because I will say this, because in our case, we do foundation military intelligence across all topic areas in a global manner, there's always something that's not simply covered. It doesn't have coverage so that the data is not even available, even if the tools could deliver it to us. That's the real challenge from a key intelligence question. If you look at today's world, how fast we have to pivot between crises and activities.
Yeah.
We're not clairvoyant. We are not jumping ahead with predictive capability to that degree.
We don't know what we don't know to some degree.
Oftentimes we don't know what we don't know. And then as we're moving into the AI world, recognizing how data is manipulated or altered, and making sure that we can defend against that and protect it and understand what is real and what has been altered or modified for different purposes. That's going to be a critical piece of data from the open source side moving forward. Trusting that data, that it hasn't been manipulated. If it has, why, by whom, and in what manner is all going to matter to us. So having those kind of detection capabilities, that's something that I don't see out there quite yet. There's some there, but not all.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you. That was a tough one. Didn't mean to do that right off the bat. But let's see what we got next. Lloyd Dabbs, Sandbox AQ asks, will Mars look to address enhanced cybersecurity to include post-quantum cryptography in the coming years?
We will move as fast as the department at addressing the cybersecurity. We are following all the requirements of DoD for cybersecurity today. And as they move into what is available for quantum protection, it'll be applicable. It's not a choice. It's a matter of DoD policy will dictate and we will follow.
Fantastic. Lauren Kiwa, one of our INSA alumni, now with Base 2 Solutions, she asked, what is the acquisition plan for small business that has been set aside for the Mars program?
I don't really want to get in too much to the acquisition plan. Unfortunately, that is one of those challenges of there's a lot of pieces here to this that are Mars that are being developed, and then there's pieces that are outside of Mars that we can bring in, and that gets back to the interoperability aspect. It doesn't have to be built in Mars to be a part of Mars, and that is completely separate because that's not under our control.
Okay, so then a follow-on that you may or may not be able to engage on as well is DIA planning a potential purchase of PIA data sets for integration into Mars. So that may be something that you can't speak to. I'm not sure.
So in that case, I will say that the responsibility for data purchases really lies with other parts of DIA, not Mars. We are a tool to make the data available, but we're not the tool that is buying the data. That is a different part of the organization, and I would refer you to them.
Fantastic. Okay, so something that may be a bit more clear dealing with future vision. So what advancements or milestones are planned for the Mars program? Are there any future applications envisioned for the program in the near or far term?
Short answer is yes, of course. I mean, as we evolve and technology enables us,
always have to be innovating, yeah.
We will take full advantage of that. And as I mentioned, the predictive nature of intelligence, the key piece there is as things become available that are predictive and we have confidence in those predictions, that is something that we will want to apply, making sure that our system is intentionally modularly developed with agility to change the technologies as they come about or to connect to the technologies as they come about. That is critical. So when we talk about predictive analysis, I mentioned earlier the quality assurance framework, making sure we understand how that analysis is done is key. Making sure it's connectable using the same systems, the same data labeling aspects, data standards are being met. That's another aspect of this. We want to take full advantage of this because we need to be able to do this across all domains globally. And there are domains that need to be built out still, quite frankly. And that is a challenge. It's not our challenge to take on entirely, but it's a challenge that we're ready to go after from a perspective of incorporating, adopting, adapting, and leveraging what is available to us.
Fantastic. And we have another great question here, something I think you can engage on from Tom Sweatman. How does Mars fit into the information sharing and collaboration needs of our COCOMs to work with coalition allies and partners? So we talked about our international partners a little bit previously, but can you speak a little bit about the COCOM integration?
So one of the key pieces there, I will say, is the fact that I mentioned we have, our foreign partners. That's driven by the commands already. So within the organization, there are a number of committees that work on what is and is not releasable and what is shareable, what attributes of information are available, and to whom. And that will depend, and that's another aspect of the predictive nature of that changes with time as coalitions have to change or be developed, depending on the activities that are happening in the world. We've seen this with, we had the coalition for ISAF, we've had coalitions for Iraq, we've had coalitions that are enduring, the NATO aspect. Those are ongoing, and different commands interact with them differently depending on their own mission sets. So as those grow and change, we have to grow with them, and we just follow the policy that is delivered from a foreign disclosure activity. That is, we implement what is directed, in a sense.
Yeah.
Policy is not ours to create, it's ours to implement and execute.
Yeah, as you're receiving the policies from ODNI and for your own leadership aspects, yeah, you guys are going to go through the implementation plan of those policies. So that's a great point. So this is a follow-on, and I think you've kind of already answered it to some degree, but the role that Mars plays in missions performed by the Space Force, or I would say any of the MILDEPs or services. Can you speak a little bit to those, if there are any major differences from what you just said?
So I'll just say that, MIDB didn't handle things that were out of this world, per se. Talk about space, you're talking about a space domain that hasn't been covered in the same way as the rest of the Foundation military intelligence. But we're changing that, and that's part of our work and our intention, and it's active development going on to address that now, meeting the requirements that have been provided to us by the command and by the Space Force.
Fantastic. So as we're coming up close on time, so I want to close out with a bigger picture question to bring us back out. What are the biggest technological hurdles you anticipate in expanding the program's capabilities over the next 5 to 10 years? So we know that you're going to have to find new tools, new solutions, be innovative here in the coming years. But what are some of the potential or the largest hurdles that you're anticipating as a part of that?
So earlier you talked about cultural boundaries and structural boundaries and aspects. Getting things delivered fast enough, recognizing that it has to have confidence behind it, that it is valid and effective and relevant to mission. That's a key piece of our one big challenge. We can't rush things. We have to do it right. We have to make sure that things are delivered. But I can tell you that as I talk to analysts that have used the program that exists now, they're already like, I just wish it was done because this is so much easier than what they used to use. And it's true, and it's encouraging to me, but it just means the pressure to go faster doesn't take away from we must do it right.
Yeah.
As AI comes online and how we actually bring that in, what do we do? How do we do it? And what's appropriate? That's going to become critical. I would not be surprised with pressure, both to do it faster and then pressure from the public to be concerned about what does this mean? How is this being used? Oversight will be critical, and the oversight being in place to make sure that it is done effectively, legally, morally, ethically. That's going to be critical. And there's a lot of activity going on in that space right now within the DoD and within the U.S. government at large. And that's a case where how we adapt, how we manage that is one of those big challenges that is a great unknown, because as policy changes, like I said, we have to implement and we have to maintain execution. There's also the issue of, does everybody move at the same speed? And the answer we already know is no.
Yeah.
So it's not just the policy speed, but it's also the speed at which other programs can keep up with technology changes so that we have the interoperability and can continue to provide what we're delivering today.
Dr. Tim Wood, thank you so much. We're up against time. If you have any closing thoughts in the next 30 seconds that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear.
I would just like to say thank you again for this opportunity. I know that there's a lot of interest in our program. There's a lot of opportunity here. the open source community especially, we care about it because we know that that is a high level of value of information. We want to take full advantage of it, and we want to do this in a well-informed way, both for you and for us. And this is where that standards, I can't preach it enough, really gets us to make interoperable and understandable workflows move forward faster. And it helps us with that AI understanding and that movement into confidence in how we deliver information to the warfighter and to the policymaker.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Dr. Woods, for being, Dr. Wood, excuse me, for being here. Just absolutely amazing conversation today. And thank you for joining us this morning and for watching our amazing conversation. A special thank you to James for sponsoring this event. And for everyone, thank you again just for being a part of the program. When the webinar ends, a short survey will pop up. Please take a moment to complete it and let us know how we did. Looking ahead very quickly, on Tuesday, January 28th, we will hold a breakfast and panel discussion on U.S. Cybercom's new acquisition authorities. We've already got Mr. Nguyen confirmed from the Command Acquisition Executive and Director of the U.S. Cyber Command's Cyber Acquisition and Technology Directorate, Colonel retired Candace Frost, Vice Chair of our Cyber Council and Integrated DoD Account Director at Nightwing, will serve as our moderators. And stay tuned for more speakers. And in celebration of Black History Month, join us for Future Focused National Security Priorities 2025 at Amazon HQ2 on Wednesday, February 5th. This is an absolutely all-star panel. The Honorable Ron Moultrie will be joining us, as well as Dr. Teresa Horn and Charles Carruthers, with more speakers to be announced very soon, more senior folks. So please watch out for that. And if you want to learn more about these events and all of our events coming up, please go to insaonline.org. Thank you again for joining us. We can't do it without you. We really appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day.